Think about the last time you trusted a brand. Odds are it wasn't because of a logo, it was because of a person. And when a big brand lets their people lead the conversation on social, the results aren't just feel good moments, they're measurable loyalty signals. Rashad Alaiyan saw it firsthand at IBM Watson Health, and he's here to break it down for us. You won't want to miss this one. Welcome to the Social Media CX podcast, where social media meets customer experience and where all fires, no rainbows is the current reality for most brands. I'm Brooke Sellas, CEO of B Squared Media, and I'm on a mission to change that. Social media can be the MVP of your CX strategy, and I'm here to show you how. Each week, we'll tackle the challenges of social care head-on with candid interviews, real-world case studies, and actionable advice to turn your social channels into loyalty-building, revenue-driving dopamine machines. Whether you're managing customer complaints, trying to engage meaningfully, or just tired of missing DMs, this podcast is your guide to putting out the fires and building the rainbows. Who's been a principal social media consultant for global brands including IBM, Salesforce, and Audi. He actually helped humanize the Merative brand, formerly IBM Watson Health. This healthcare tech company doubled down on employee-led content. Why? Because featuring your people builds morale internally and trust externally. In this episode, we're going to explore how these stories turned into customer experience wins. Rashad, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brooke.
Thank you so much for coming on. You've worked with some pretty impressive brands, so I'm very excited to talk to you. And I think the central theme for me, just kind of in our previous conversations, is that employee content feels like the ultimate trust signal. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of brands on social media generally will just post about their products. And when you're inundated with that kind of content, you kind of get over it. Like you just don't want to engage with those brands. It's not really like a fun story to hear over and over again. So the brands that actually stand out are the ones that are actually telling humanized stories, the ones about their employees. And I think it's just a way to really showcase your brand in a very crowded market, especially on social.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And why do you think so few brands focus on employee advocacy or telling stories through employees? Like, why is this such a miss for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of business leaders are rightfully obsessed with the bottom line, right? We're trying to generate profits. So the idea is if we just post about our products, people will go and click the URL and go buy your product. But the truth is humans are way more complex than that, right? We want to hear stories about our friends, our families, even our coworkers, and we want to feel a connection to the brand. So think of like a Nike, right? When they post an ad, it's always featuring like an athlete. They never say just buy our shoes. It's always like Serena Williams or LeBron James. So when you feel an emotional connection to a spot on social media, you're more likely to want to engage with that brand. And in turn, you're going to ultimately be funneled, go down the funnel and end up buying that product. So I think it's like a win-win, but it takes a lot of like boldness in order to do that because like a business owner wants just the ultimate goal is to make money, but it's a long-term play. You can't just get there through one click in my mind.
I can't agree more, but also help me understand these complex industries. So IBM Watson Health sounds like a complex industry, right? We're talking about healthcare and we're talking about AI. So how does people over products work even when it's a complex industry or maybe an industry that has a lot of red tape like finances? How does that still work? And how do you get them to buy into this?
Yeah. So when I helped IBM Watson Health rebrand to Merative, we no longer had the IBM name. So the brand recognition was no longer there. So in my mind, the way to stand out was by telling stories about our employees. So once a week for the first few months of Merative, we posted about an employee of the company and told their personal stories.
So cool. So, and then I'm assuming there was like an emotional ROI that happens, right? Because you're using storytelling, it's employee led. emotions kind of baked in. What kind of responses did you get on social media to these employee stories? With your emotional responses, did they come back to you?
Yeah, the emotional response was through the roof. So we saw an over 100% increase in engagement on those posts where we were featuring our employees. And so at first, say on LinkedIn, we were getting about 40 or 50 likes per post. But when we started featuring people,
Yeah.
whether it be an executive or somebody who just joined the company, when we started featuring them, we saw over 100 likes. And that was because we were telling the story about them as an employee, what they did at the company. We also told stories about what they did on their free time. And then we also posted a picture of them just in their element, right? Like somebody on a hike. And those posts just like were the kind of things we want to see on LinkedIn, right? We don't want to see a brand posting like
Yeah.
buy this product. We are used to seeing our friends and family posted on social media. So people, whether it be their coworkers started engaging more, the people featured started engaging more. And by engaging, I mean, people were commenting in the dozens. Like, oh my God, it's so great to work with you,
Yeah.
Brooke, for example. Like, so people were hyping up their employees. And then we actually saw the people being featured actually start engaging way more in our other posts. So once they got recognized, they then felt comfortable engaging with other posts that weren't even about them. And that just created a snowball effect of like brand loyalty and people being proud of where they work. And it was just really good to see.
So it was the employees gave on social, the employees gave the brand, which was under a different name, so it's not IBM anymore, gave that brand a face. It gave the brand familiarity, right? Because it's using people versus like the brand, right? Buy my stuff. But I'm also assuming that this really boosted, like you said, employee morale, because you're telling me that they posted on other posts that weren't even related to theirs. So I'm assuming you saw other metrics happen inside of the company, inside of the culture that weren't necessarily related to this campaign, right? It was kind of like a byproduct. Or were y'all measuring that as well?
Now, we weren't measuring that, but again, it was a byproduct because we saw people, again, engaging more with our content. People felt prouder to where they work. We saw coworkers congratulating their peers on being recognized and giving shout outs like, oh, you're so great to work with, John, and so forth. Because when you see your friend being recognized, you're more likely to want to give them some love. And in turn, I truly believe
Yeah.
that actually helps with employee retention, right? Because if you actually are proud of where you work, if you
Yes.
feel valued by the brand you're working at, you'll want to stick around more and you'll want to give it your all. Like whether in a meeting, you're going to share your ideas more, you're going to be more open to feedback, you're going to be a better contributor because you actually feel valued. So I think it just ultimately creates this like snowball effect, like I alluded to earlier, where people just feel proud of where they work
Yeah.
and they're more likely to want to be engaged. And I think the best kind of employee is an engaged employee, right? You don't want someone who is applying to jobs while on the clock. You want someone who's active in meetings, paying attention, sharing their voice. And I think it's really just a very powerful effect where people just want to feel valued. And by just showcasing a person literally just once, you can help them just feel so valued at the company.
I love that. And I'm assuming you mentioned like retention, but I think maybe even like recruitment. Wouldn't there be an angle for recruiting new employees too? Like they see this and I mean, I just feel like there could also be a recruitment play there. And then I just think it does a lot for brand affinity, not just for the employees, but for the friends and family of the employees who are being mentioned and highlighted.
100%.
So
Yeah. So definitely.
it
Yeah.
checks like all the boxes.
100%. It definitely helps with recruitment. So it was actually two pronged. So we saw people who were getting featured and then I don't have the metrics, but I believe there was an uptick in people interested in the company because if you see a company that showcases their employees, you're more likely to want to work there because you actually feel like they care about their employees.
Yeah.
It's not all business, right? They have a culture outside of work. So that could be LinkedIn or it could be on Instagram. And when I'm looking for a job, I'm going to those social media platforms to see what the culture is like. And if it's all business,
Yeah.
you can't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But if you can see, say, the CEO speaking at this panel, the CMOs speaking on this podcast, this person is at this event, you start to feel like a connection to the brand and you can say to yourself, like, okay, like they're very active in their community. They're a voice that is to be reckoned with. And that's somewhere where I could see myself working. And on the other hand, the second thing I wanted to allude to is we actually saw those employees who are featuring getting outreach from other companies. So that's something to be cautious of because because they see like, okay, this employee is actually making an impact here. Let me go coach them. So that's something to be cautious of.
Wow.
Like you want to be careful with that because you don't want to end up losing an employee because you were featuring them on social media.
Yeah.
So little cautionary tale there,
That's a
but
great tip.
yeah.
But it tells you just how powerful this type of marketing is, like how powerful employee advocacy is. Okay, so for people who are watching or listening, how can you make employee spotlights a part of your brand presence online or on social without it feeling performative?
Great question. So it's all about telling human stories. So if you just showcase like what the employee is doing at the company, it sounds kind of forced, right? Like, oh, I'm a product marketer. This is what I do every day. I think it's very important to show the side of them outside of work. So perhaps you go do yoga on the weekends, or you like going on hikes, you like watching sporting events. Tell the stories behind the person. And then you can also connect that to what they do at work. And I think that really kind of helps elevate the person behind the scenes, because we all see the person's like title on LinkedIn. We know what they do, but if we know like who they are outside of work, it just creates a more friendly impact, a friendly feel. So people think like, okay, this person loves going on hikes in the woods every week. And I had no idea. And it could be your coworker. How often do we talk to our coworkers about that? Right. So it just makes them feel like more
Right.
like our friends. And again, like on social media, we're so used to seeing like our friends featured on Instagram and LinkedIn. But if we see them posting about more personal things, it just feels like more authentic and not forced.
Yeah. So you got to have guardrails for authenticity. That makes total sense. Give me the logistics behind, like, how do you source and scale these stories from across departments within a company?
Yeah. So ultimately, you would need executive buy-in, because again, like you want to be cautious. Like if you're a brand new company and you have a bunch of new employees, like it is risky to feature someone who just joined, because you don't want to feature someone who then departs in like 2 or 3 months. So
Right.
ideally, it's someone who's established, say like an executive who's been there for a year or 2 years and who's not planning to leave in the near future. And it could be an executive, but also I do want to say it's very good to also feature your people who are like more mid-level or entry level, because those are more
Yeah.
like relatable stories. Say it's like a recent college grad who's been there for like a few months, 5 months, 6 months. You can tell those stories. So once you have that executive buy-in, you can then reach out to employees and ask them, are you willing to be featured? So for example, at Merative, we had a bunch of different departments. So the department heads would reach out to their teams and ask them who would like to be featured on our social media channel. And people started raising their hands left and right. We actually had a list like a few months long of people we were planning to feature. So once you start seeing your friends being recognized, you're like, hey, I want to be featured too. So it kind of becomes this like
Yeah.
fun effect where everybody's trying to like have their voice heard on social media, because you get 100 likes on your post, you start feeling good, you share it to your family and friends, and it just creates this like kind of snowball effect, as I've now said 3 times, of people just feeling
Yeah.
like they enjoy where they work and they're proud of where they work. And it just makes them like feel recognized. Ultimately, as an employee, the most important thing is being recognized.
Ugh, I love this. I just feel like, I don't know if you remember, but like several years ago, like I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, employee advocacy was like all the
Hmm.
rage. We talked about it all the time. And then what happened? I feel like we never talk about employee advocacy anymore. And so I'm really happy that we're talking about this. Hey, quick sidebar before we dive back in. If you loved the CX convo here on the Social Media CX podcast, then you'll definitely want to check out a book that totally changed the game for me. It's my book, and it's called Conversations That Connect. And y'all, this isn't your typical engagement metrics matter fluff. It's all about social led listening and how the most impactful brands are using real conversations, not just content calendars, to build trust, spark loyalty, and drive revenue. So if you've ever found yourself asking, what do we say when we show up on social? This book is your answer. Grab it on Amazon or hit the link in the show notes. Just search for Conversations That Connect by Brooke Sellas or find it on bsquared.media. How did this like idea come to be? Was it pitched in a meeting? How did it work? Like, did you have to like convince people that this was the way to go?
Yeah. So I was honestly on a walk in San Francisco and it just like came to my mind. That's my favorite place to ideate. And I thought, hey, like, why don't we feature our employee? Because we're a brand new company. And when I see a post about my friends on any social channel, I'm more likely to engage with it versus, again, a product. Like if it's just a product,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore it and keep swiping. So ultimately, I pitched it to one of our marketing leaders and they loved the idea right off the bat. So it wasn't honestly like too much of a lift. It was, here's my plan. Here's how we're going to execute it. And then within a few weeks, we started building out the team of people we wanted to feature and reaching out to them. And they shared their words. So it was whether it's, here's what I like doing on the weekend, here's what I do in my job. And they started sharing that with us, and we drafted that into social media copy. We would then grab images from them. So they say you're a big hiker. You send an image with your dog on a hike, and then we feature those posts. It was once a week for months, like the first quarter or two of working at Merative, and it just had a great impact on the company overall.
I love it. I love it so much. So tell me, okay, so we're investing, we've got buy-in, we're investing in this employee-led content or this campaign. What do we track so that we are showing impact? Because you know how the C-suite and leadership gets. They want to see bottom line, as we were saying. So what are we tracking? What are we looking at? How do we make sure that they see those results?
Yeah. So ultimately, it was all about the engagement. So we were seeing, like, again, 100% increase in engagement for our general content, which is so product focused. So that got me to understand, like, okay, not only should we feature our employees, like what they like doing on the weekend and so forth, but also feature our thought leaders at panels, at conferences, when they're at events.
Yeah.
So because we have this data that showcases that people want to see other people being featured on our channels, well, let's take it up a notch. So even when we had an executive say speaking at a conference, we would have them preview that conference on our LinkedIn page by doing a short video explaining what they're going to be talking about. And the data is right. So we have the numbers that show we have the numbers that showcase that people want to see this kind of content. So we one-upped it, right? We did a +1. So we started featuring our employees at events and panels, and we had them speaking to our audience on LinkedIn about what they talked about, what they're going to talk about, or doing recaps as a blog. So it's always imperative to look at the data and then kind of scale from there and try to improve the content even more. And I think we were really successful at doing that.
Well, and plus your energy is just infectious. So I can imagine you're like telling them your idea and they're like, "Yes," because I'm over here like, "Yes." So what about sentiment? Did you do any kind of like sentiment analysis? I'm assuming it was all positive, but did you run any sort of campaign or analytics around sentiment analysis to see if there was any like neutral or negative sentiment that popped up during the campaign?
Yeah. So there was no like specific documentation of the sentiment, but it was more so just like looking at the comments, especially in the reposts. And no joke, over 95% of it was positive. So people hyping up their friends
Yeah,
and
I
family
bet.
and coworkers. I mean, nobody's really going to want to badmouth someone on LinkedIn or Instagram, but
Hopefully not.
right. But from what I saw, it was all positive. People hyping people up, and actually improved like the culture at the company. It actually made people feel like more valued. And I truly believe that actually can help
Yeah.
with employee retention. If we feel like people are giving us love, not only internally, but actually externally on LinkedIn, that's huge, right? Like my
Yes.
boss giving me a shout out on LinkedIn there's no better feeling. So seeing that,
Love
it was
it.
just like this positive like vibe just flowing left and right. And I think that's how you can like get people to stick around at a company and even actually like recommend the company to their family and friends potentially like, to work at. But I actually do want to mention, like, think about like a customer who's seeing this too. You're more likely to want to spend your money with a brand that you trust. And there's no bigger gauge of trust than seeing a company that actually features their people. Because so many companies, like we said when we started, product content, product content, product content. But the ones that actually make a difference and actually can like stand out are the ones that are posting about their people and telling those stories. And I actually think people are more likely to spend money on the brands that they trust. They're more likely to refer those brands to their family and friends. And even, like we said, they're more
100%.
likely to want to work there. Why wouldn't I want to work at a company that I trust? So I think it's just like so
Yeah.
multifaceted. And I think that's benefit of using social media in a way to really like elevate your brand. You just got to feature your people and take some risks, but I think it's ultimately like very beneficial.
The risk that you mentioned, though, is worth the reward, right?
Mhm.
And I hear you saying, if we're talking about what we should we be tracking, if y'all are listening or watching, what you should be tracking, I heard you say there are external metrics, so like engagement, impressions, sentiment, if you're tracking that. But there were also internal metrics that you should look at. So like morale, advocacy, referrals, things like that were happening inside of the recruitment, retention, right? And then I'm sure, because it's like you said, it's so multifaceted, there are probably a lot of soft signals in there too, somewhere that could help you get to harder business outcomes or ROI. So how did this end up going? Or is this something they do all the time? Was it just like a campaign for one period and they bring it back every so often? Or what does that look like? Do you do it all the time, or is it just like a frequency kind of thing?
Yeah, so I haven't worked with Merative in a few years, so I'm not aware if they're still doing that. But I actually do recommend this to all of my clients. So it is risky because, again, like if you're a brand new company, like one of my clients is a Series A, so they're brand new. So they're being cautious about who they're sharing because they don't want to be featuring somebody who's only been there for a few months, right? But there are other ways to go around this, right? So say you have a new employee, you can post them, you can highlight them, you can say, congratulations, welcome to the team. And you see a lot of brands doing that. So that's like a less risky way of doing it. But if you want to tell those like powerful stories, which I actually think is like leveling up that just intro post, like welcome to the team. If you actually want to tell your followers about who a person is at the brand, you do want to like have at least have them be in the door for at least 6 months. I would recommend.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's a good tip too. Yeah. Okay, are you ready for rapid fire wrap up?
yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to ask you a question. It's just rapid fire. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. What's one thing brands get wrong about employee content?
Biggest thing they get wrong is they don't even try it. They try to stay away from it.
Ah,
They just think, okay, we need to make money, so let's just post about our products. And the social team is left with posting links left and right that don't get clicked on, and they just have to realize you got to be patient. You got to like, it's a long game. Once people feel trust in you, then they'll click on those links.
yeah, agreed. Finish this sentence. The future of social media customer experience is.
Authenticity. You want people to feel like brands are actually telling a story that resonates with them. You don't want to spend your money with brands that are just like blabbering and trying to force you to click on their links. And
Yes.
a brand that comes to mind is Nike. Like Nike is very authentic. We can feel a connection to these people who are so far out of our league, LeBron James, Serena Williams. And yet we feel like
Right.
just do it resonates so much that we put on those shoes and we can also excel. So it's all about being authentic.
It's so true. It's just the psychology of parasocial relationships. That's a whole other episode, but y'all go just Google it if you don't know this yet. Look up parasocial relationships. And this is where you see someone like me or like Rashad on this podcast now, and we're chit-chatting, we're talking, but you feel like you're getting to know us as people. So you feel like you know me. This actually happens sometimes. I'll go to an event and somebody will be like, oh, I listened to your podcast. They feel like they know me. I'm just meeting them. That is what a parasocial relationship is. So what Rashad is referring to with like LeBron and Serena, we feel like we know who they are, right? But we don't really know who they are. But that's what doing this type of campaign and employee advocacy program can do for your brand. Thank you so much for all of that. Rashad just gave us the playbook on building trust from the inside out of your company or your brand. If you want to turn your team into your greatest brand asset, your cue, just like you said, is just to start, right? Stop looking in the other direction. So thank you so much for visiting us and sharing all this wisdom. And finally, tell us where we can find you, because I'm sure people are going to want to connect with you and ask you questions and pick your brain about employee advocacy after this.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Rashad Alaiyan. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram under the same name.
Awesome. We will make sure to post all of these links below in the show notes. If you're listening, I'm pointing down for all of you who are watching. The show notes always happen on YouTube underneath the videos. We will have all of those links to find Rashad, connect with him, and pick his brain about all of the excellent employee advocacy advice he gave today. Thank you all so much for joining me again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Social Media CX podcast. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to up their social care game.